So Zoe, I still see those photos of you and Robin.
Okay, that's interesting. I don't. One moment.
Is it because I'm the host?
I see them as well.
Yeah.
Did that just get rid of them?
No. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar today. I'm Keith Martin, and we'll start the webinar in a few moments. Okay, I did it myself, Zoe, and it removed you and Robin.
Excellent.
But now I just see you. Can you undo whatever you just did? Zoe, can you hear me?
Yes,
We're seeing that picture again, and it's right in the center of the screen now.
I think that might be your view. If you can click on your view and click hide non-video participants. It's the top right corner just before where it says participants. If you click on view. And there should be the fourth option down says hide non-video participants. It's because we're co-hosting, we both have to do this.
I'm not seeing that option.
So in the top right-hand corner, you're seeing something called view.
Yes.
If you click on it and it pulls down a menu that says my view. And then the option should be speaker, gallery, show self view, hide non-video participants.
Okay, hello everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar. We'll just wait a few more moments and then we'll get started. Well, good afternoon and welcome to this third CAFII webinar of 2024 on mental health issues in the workplace. We have three expert panelists today. I would introduce each of them in detail, but they are so expert and have such impressive resumes that I think it would take 5 or 10 minutes. So I am going to simply encourage each of you to look at the eBlast invitation and take a look at the details around these three excellent panelists, who are Paula Allen from TELUS Health, Jennifer Heaslip from Canada Life, and Jeff Scott from BMO. We're so appreciative to the three of you for joining us today. Now, my name is Keith Martin, and I am the Executive Director of the Canadian Association of Financial Institutions in Insurance, or CAFII. On behalf of myself and the CAFII Board of Directors, thank you for joining our webinar today. CAFII is a not-for-profit association dedicated to the development of an open and flexible insurance marketplace. Our 15 members include the insurance arms of Canada's major banks and credit unions, along with their insurer partners, which underwrite credit protection insurance and travel insurance. This is another in our webinar series with key regulators, policymakers, and other experts and thought leaders in the insurance sector and on related societal issues. Members of the audience, if you have any questions that you would like to pose to the panelists during this webinar, please send them to me as the host using the Q&A function of Zoom, and I will pose them on your behalf. Unless you specifically request in your question to be identified as its host, I will pose all questions on an anonymous basis. And just before we get the webinar underway today, I want to extend a special welcome to a number of VIP guest attendees. In addition to many representatives from our 15 CAFII member companies and our 10 associates, which are key supplier companies to the bancassurance sector, we have VIP attendees today from allied industry associations, such as the Canadian Life and Health Insurance Association, or CLHIA, and the Travel and Health Insurance Association, or THIA, and as well from a number of insurance and financial services regulator and policymaker authorities, including the following: the Autorité des marchés financiers, or the AMF, the Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario, or FSRA, the Insurance Councils of Saskatchewan, or ICS, the Government of Saskatchewan, the Alberta Insurance Council, and the Government of Alberta. Welcome to you all. So to get us started, Paula Allen will share some of the recent research results she has identified through her work to give us a bit of context, and then we'll open it up for interactive discussion. So Paula, over to you.
Great. Thanks very much, Keith, and welcome everybody. I always appreciate these types of forums. It gives us all a chance to crystallize the things that we know and hear from others and know a little bit more. I'd like to just start with just some thoughts. We're definitely more focused on mental health now than ever before, but really, are we keeping up? Like, are we looking at the pace of change, the trends that are sort of impacting mental health? Do we fully appreciate what I believe is going to be an increased importance of mental well-being as the workplace changes, as expectations grow? So just a few things to get us thinking. The three things, there's many things that we know, but three things that I'm going to speak about at the moment. One is that we need to be very cognizant of the mental health of younger cohorts, younger workers, and those coming into the workforce. I mean, we've always known that around that kind of late teen or early 20s is a vulnerable time. I mean, your brain is kind of adapting physically to adulthood. There's a lot of change of basically your life and moving into different roles. There's a lot of strain. So we've known that that's a vulnerable time for mental health for quite some time, but what we're seeing now is different. What we're seeing now is each and every successive cohort, likely because they're being born into very different worlds, very different social structures, very different demands, even earlier puberty, which helps, create a sense of being overwhelmed. We are seeing much greater mental health and well-being vulnerability, to the point where we're seeing the risk that we saw in the early 20s carry through. We're actually in our data seeing that high risk period now under 40 as opposed to under 25. So think about that in terms of the demographic shifts, a very different workplace in the very near future. You may have also known about the epidemic of loneliness that we are seeing. The World Health Organization had a major cry about it. We've seen this trend over decades. We're just seeing it intensify right now. And definitely this impacts our mental health, but it also impacts our physical health. So that is something that we need to be aware of. And then the accelerated pace of change, that's one of the factors with the younger cohort, but we are going to see that pace pick up. We're all aware of AI and we're all aware of the good things that are going to come, but we are just at the very beginning. There is an expectation of an exponential curve in its power and its impact. And we are already on a faster and faster pace. So there's only so much that our brain can adapt to, and that is something that creates some vulnerability as well. Now, just a little bit further on the point around isolation and loneliness, I mentioned that it impacts our mental health. Absolutely, it does. Increase depression, also executive function, that kind of brain fog. But we also see very strong and repeated research on its impact on our bodies. Increase of heart disease, dementia, immune system disorders. You may have also heard that we're seeing some interesting trend, even in terms of cancers, which is largely considered related to immune system, where the pace, the rate of diagnosis of certain cancers is increasing much faster in younger individuals. So your risk is still greater if you're older, but it's increasing when you're younger. So many factors likely contributing to that. Some hypotheses that this might be one. Now, in terms of the next point, we also know that we have some structures in place that can be helpful and are helpful. But let's take a pretty critical look on what we have. You know, one that I support wholeheartedly is employee assistance programs, the crisis response, the family support, work-life support, as well as the counseling. But how helpful can something be if people don't know about it? And we were astounded to find that 4 in 10 workers don't know what EAP is or haven't heard about it. And these are workers that had EAPs in their organizations. 35%, know what it covers and know what it is, which is important, is only 1/3. And we find that there's a lot of people, that 25%, who have heard the term, but have egregious expectations that you have to pay, that you have to be referred by your manager. So this is not good. I mean, we can do better as an industry in terms of being more active and aggressive and assertive and repetitive in terms of letting people know what they have, because you tell somebody something once, you haven't told them anything at all. The other thing that we have is that we have tools like pharmacogenomics. We know how difficult mental health medication is. We know that a large proportion is actually taking mental health medication, but we also know that there's a high proportion of situations where it doesn't work and it takes a long time to work. And what that does is not only does it reduce people's ability to recover, sometimes you can't benefit from counseling unless your symptoms are under control. Sometimes you lose hope and your condition actually gets worse as a result of this medication cycling. So we have this, but again, is it embedded? Is it normalized? Is it something that we're leveraging? I think that we can actually elevate this tool as well. And the last thing I'll mention is the workplace environment, because we know that mental health is an individual issue, but it's also about one's context. There's some real significant discussion around psychosocial risk in the workplace, legislation with fines in Australia, and a lot of attention in terms of its impact. And these are the results from Canada, and they're really not that good. When you think about it, we have a high proportion of our population that is experiencing this risk on an ongoing basis. 50% of employees are saying that rewards and recognition are unbiased, which means 50% are not. If you look to bullying and harassment, one of the most fundamental things being dealt with quickly, 64% say that it is dealt with quickly, a large proportion not. So we have a lot of opportunity to even leverage what we have, but we probably need to go further given the pace of change. So consider what we have in terms of our current trends. Likely we are going to have more compromises to mental well-being. Consider workplace expectations. We're likely to have more cognitive work. We're likely to have higher productivity expectations. That's been the trend in the past, and it's likely to accelerate with AI. And what are we doing now? Are we even keeping up with what we have right now when the demand is going to be more? So a lot for us to think about, I think a lot to talk about, and I think a lot of opportunity for us to actually close the gap on what people need. So Pete, those are the end of my comments, and really looking forward to hearing from you, Jennifer and Jeff.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And I'm going to pick up on those themes with you first, Jen, and ask you about the impact of workplace, economic, and societal pressures on the mental health of employees and customers. Oh, you're on mute, Jennifer.
Many pressures are facing employees currently, balancing those economic demands, caring for others, so aging parents, children, kind of the sandwich generation. As Paula spoke to, isolation and loneliness for sure. Folks that are living alone are having to balance a lot of different things too. Personal economics on one salary, and also assessing healthcare providers. We're seeing increased food costs and housing costs as well. So it's causing a lot of pressure. And no wonder many people are feeling really overloaded. Its impact is pretty complex if you think about it. So if someone has an existing mental health concern, for example, depression or anxiety, the two most dominant mental health disorders, one of the symptoms is rumination. So if you can think about how many people might be ruminating about all those problems, and sometimes when we ruminate about things, it just even makes the problem more compounded and increases the symptoms of those disorders. There's recently a study that came from Yale's Global Affairs, School of Global Affairs, showing that mental illness alters people's consumption, savings, portfolio choices, as well as the country's labor supply, generating enormous amounts of annual cost to our economy. In Canada alone, we estimate that over 50 billion per year is lost, and that includes healthcare costs, lost productivity, and reductions in health-related quality of life. So there's lots going on for folks right now. I think that one of the things to mention too is the pressure to be normal. So lots of people are watching social media, trying to keep up with other people's highlight reels. And really, that's not really the truth for what's going on for folks, right? They're putting out their best face forward on these social media platforms. And some may even call this like toxic positivity. So for folks that are maybe struggling or maybe not feeling that they're living up to their own societal standards or their own wants or desires, oftentimes people with mental health will find themselves struggling and maybe even feeling guilty for not meeting these societal norms. Lots of pressure to be happy. So overly emphasizing positivity can create an unattainable norm that also in turn impacts well-being too.
Thanks very much for that, Jen. A lot to unpack. Jeff, do you want to jump in on this?
I mean, there is a lot to unpack there. And I was actually thinking about how it connects to what Paula was sharing too, just some of the stats. I don't think we all have to look too far to find sort of compelling statistics that sort of really sort of address the call to action. You know, I guess maybe to think about it about, you know, so like how are we working to destigmatize you know, the topic and continue the conversation, because the stats to me, they're the call to action. And while sometimes daunting, in fairness, sometimes they almost become, you know, arguably their own mental health challenge in and of itself, because it just seems like such a huge problem to tackle in society, and particularly for those of us that are connected to doing meaningful work on the topic overall. You know, I think the key is really just continuing the dialogue, right? So the fact that we're here today, and Keith, like a shout out to choosing to host a session on the topic of mental health. This is fundamentally one of the simplest ways that we can continue to address the issues. I think like continuing conversations like this, kind of getting out and speaking about the topic. I know all of us probably have opportunities, certainly those of us on the panel, to speak about this at regular intervals. And it's, you know, I feel like, you know, I feel compelled to try to do my best to attend as many of those just to continue the dialogue. And, you know, so we want to just to continue to keep the conversation going. I mean, mental health is health, full stop. Let's just say that, make that comment right now. It is health. We need to sort of tackle it head on and speak openly about it. I think too, you know, because we're, in most cases, you see organizations have established wellness and well-being strategies. I think they've gone about sort of the idea of addressing this by at least kind of establishing a strategy or establishing programming that specifically speaks to the mounting challenges related to mental health. But honestly, it kind of comes back to, and again, a lot what Jennifer was saying there. I mean, there needs to be this willingness to talk about it. So for us, one of the things that we're really trying to push is, you know, that becomes sort of cultural. Like, how do you enable the culture to speak openly about mental health? How are you taking away some of that stigma by maybe as simply how ensuring that your leaders speak openly about their own journey with mental health, about how they're you know, how they're feeling on any given day, just, you know, kind of making that a part of the lexicon of any day-to-day conversation. So I think there's we're on a journey here for sure.
Well, thanks, Jeff. I'm going to come back to you on a couple of the points you made and ask you to elaborate. But first, I just want to go to you quickly, Paula, and ask you, how does Canada rank internationally around company support structures for employees facing mental health issues?
Yeah, well, we've looked at this in a couple of ways. We support 160 different companies in my organization, and our mental health index is in a number of companies as well. If I were to summarize it in one sentence, I'd say we're doing okay. We're kind of middle of the pack. We're better than some, worse than others. But one of the things that's always a caution with any kind of benchmarking is benchmarking yourself against general mediocrity is not something you should pat yourself on the back for. So where we're pretty strong is we do have good general benefits generally, given our system. We do have relatively good penetration of services such as EAP. We're kind of meandering a bit in terms of the psychological health and safety in the workplace. And the chart that I showed you, we did globally, and we are pretty much middle of the pack, but we're really kind of falling back on a couple of things that are quite important. In Europe, for example, there is a lot more focus on work-life balance and also employee control and input. The International Labor Organization, ISO, have put out frameworks that are more widely adopted. There are organizations, and we've experienced this ourselves, who will go out to a vendor, and as part of their vendor criteria, the vendor has to show that they are supporting their workers' mental health and well-being, because we know it filters through into quality. We know it filters through into stability and sustainability, but we also have organizations understanding that this is a social responsibility that impacts all of us. So I think we have a little ways to go, particularly in the workplace area, also in supports and services, but I think we need to have some energy behind that. I do fear that kind of we're in the middle of the pack sometimes feels comfortable, and it should not.
That's really insightful. Thank you for sharing that. Jeff, I want to go back to your comment, mental health is health. So, there's emerging societal recognition, I think, that just as anybody can get physically sick, mental health issues and challenges are no different. What are you seeing in your organization and more broadly, Jeff, in terms of helping continue the effort to destigmatize the topic of mental health?
Yeah. And I think, I want to believe that we're moving beyond sort of the emerging stage. To be honest, I want to believe that we're into a better dialogue about the topic overall. But that's, I would say, equally, it's almost like you're never fully ahead of it. I think you have to, like, as Paula mentioned in some of the stats at the beginning, I feel like the question we might need to be asking ourselves is, are our efforts outpacing the evolution of the topic of mental health? Because in some ways we're kind of like need to continue the chase, I guess, as it were. For us in our organization, and I touched on it a little bit earlier, but it is absolutely taking on the form of really trying to embed it in culture, right? So for us and for me personally, my perspective is that comes through a very intentional effort to be open and transparent about talking about the topic, right? And often, as is often the case, based on a long history of hierarchical organizational structures, it starts with leaders, and so we're being very intentional about trying to arm our leaders with both the courage and the comfort, along with the knowledge, to address the topic, right? We want them to be speaking openly about their own mental health journeys, their own mental health challenges, and as simply as I'm feeling this way this day, to more complex ways that they talk about how they might be, sort of seeking to manage their own mental health journey. We want them to be well aware of the programming that we have in place so that they can speak logically and articulately about the programming that's in place to support them and the employees in the workplace. And we just want them to create time for their teams for the topic of mental health, like not necessarily to speak about it, but to address it. You know, simple things like today we're going to have our 20-person meeting today. It's a virtual meeting. We're not sharing any slides. It's a conversation and some information we're sharing. So we're all going to walk while we talk today. We're going to go on a walk. We're going to, use that opportunities to get some fresh air and some whatever to sort of clear our heads and to really just, do a simple thing to address, how we're feeling that day, our mental health, et cetera. So, I mean, these are super organic ideas, but they're also, I would argue, very easy to implement. Like, we're not talking about the next whiz bang piece of technology. We're just talking about very simple things we all could do if we chose to do them in the cultures of our organizations. And so we're just trying our best to lead the path that way.
Well, let me follow up with you on this, Jen. Do you feel that the stigma around mental health issues has really gone away? And can a person's career still be negatively impacted if they reveal that they suffer from mental health issues? And I will say that we've had this webinar on mental health issues in the prior 2 years, and that was something that came up, that there's still some people, whether it's correct or not, who feel that if they say they have a mental health issue, it will affect their career projection. Jen, what are your thoughts?
I think it depends. So that's such a great answer, right? I think what Jeff just spoke about, I think creates a lot of safety in organizations when we're able to do this and show these really great pro-health behaviors. Leaders having those conversations, leaders feeling comfortable about talking about difficult topics like mental health, and really starting to demystify mental health, because we all have mental health and we all have had struggles at different times. And so even kind of explaining that to leaders and walking them through about what may contribute to somebody having some stress or strain, even personally or at work as well too. Do I think it's gone away? Unfortunately, no, I don't. I think it's something we continue to need to chip away at, doing a lot of health promotion, as Paula was talking about. I think she said 4 in 10 people don't know they have an EAP. I witness that at least once or twice a week where somebody tells me that they're not really sure about those supports, and we have great ones. So, I'm always happy to talk about them, but when people are not feeling 100% sure about where to reach out for support, it's difficult to think that stigma is going away because we're not talking about it enough. I always like to use that stat that by 40 years of age, 1 out of 2 of us has experienced a mental health concern at some point in their lives, whether it's diagnosed or not. We've all have been through things. And I think that there's a lot of pieces we can keep contributing forward towards. There's also a thing that I've come across is well-meaning stigma. And it's when you got a leader that really cares about an employee that's struggling and maybe doesn't want to give them an extra project because they don't want to push them over maybe onto a leave or to create more strain for them. And so that person gets looked over for perhaps job advancement or other opportunities. And that's still quite a concern. I would just really encourage leaders to talk to their employees about how they're doing and what they think they can handle and what opportunities they're looking for as well too. And just because we know somebody has maybe had a struggle in the past doesn't mean that they're not up for the challenge down the road too.
So no assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
Paula, I'd like to ask you to jump in on this topic of the stigma and whether it still exists.
Oh yeah, it does, and there's different levels of stigma as well. I think as a society, it's become less socially acceptable to demonstrate stigmatizing behaviors. It doesn't always mean that people don't think it, and really I think it really comes down to a lack of knowledge. When people understand mental health issues, when they understand how it works, the recovery possibility, the fact that there's still capability even with people who are struggling, how to support. When you have knowledge, then the stigma goes down. There's just not enough of knowledge. And one of the interesting things is self stigma. I think we have a lot of work to do there, because even when environments themselves are inclusive and supportive, sometimes people have a hard time believing it. Sometimes they have a hard time accepting that, they have a health issue and they need to get support for that health issue. We see a lot of issues in high demand workplaces as well. So, professional services, law, like there's a lot of high demand healthcare, where the ability to sort of say, well, no, I need to pause and I need to get some support. It doesn't mean I need to give away my career. It doesn't mean that I am weak. It just doesn't happen. People wait until they break, and you see substance issues, you see people exiting their careers, you see, really negative outcomes because of that lack of acceptance. Like literally, we can draw the line and say stigma actually does literally kill. So I do think that there is a lot that we can do. It starts with knowledge. It starts with acceptance that we can't just say, okay, well, we're all fine now. The younger generation is in a different place. It is hard to change attitudes, and this one is sticking a little bit longer than we would hope it would.
Great, thank you for that, Paula. Jeff, I want to talk to you about how mental health issues don't necessarily have to be major incidents. I'm thinking, for example, of COVID-19 pandemic and its aftermath, which caused a lot of low-level chronic stress and anxiety, but over time, that can really affect people's lives. Is this a major concern in your view? And is this something with potential long-lasting implications? And finally, Jeff, how should employers consider structuring programs and support to address this?
So, I mean, short answer, yes. It is a concern, of course. I think so. To your point, does it take a significant event as COVID to drive mental health issues significantly? No, it doesn't. They are obviously ever present, and Paula shared a lot of really great statistics that kind of referenced that, and it's kind of ever growing reality. I think we're kind of, again, sort of referencing some of the stats, right? We're more connected than we've ever been. Therefore, we are more in demand than we have ever been. And those simple realities, I think, lead to a number of stressors that haven't existed in this way previously, and they are ever changing and growing. And so we can anticipate that the stressors will as well evolve and increase. So it is for sure something that we need to be thinking about and considering as a long-term concern that we need to address. So for us, and one of the ways I think that that starts to make sense. So again, back to my comment earlier, I think for the most part, with a major generalization here, many companies have made some degree of investment in well-being and mental health support over a period of time, and that may have ramped up significantly over the duration of COVID, and lots of great pieces of programming added to a bucket of offerings that were well-intended and directionally good. But what became problematic from there, I would argue, is how do I make sense of everything that's in this bucket, and how do I get at it? And Jennifer, you just made the comment about I'm regularly talking to and having to explain to people, yes, you do have an EAP, and it looks like this, and this is what its use case is. And yet you're one person, or I'm one person. And so the idea of needing to be, or being able to be out there and explaining that to, in our case, 55,000 people in our organization is, I'd love to believe I had that kind of scale. But, and so we're trying to just continue to tell the story in different ways. We're looking at the spectrum of our offering across a simplistic articulation of preventative measures, reactive measures, or are you injured or are you ill? And trying to really just speak about it in this simplistic way across that journey. And then in turn, sort of share, sort of some of the offerings that we might have in those categories. If you're thinking about a preventative need in the mental health space, you might be looking for something as simple as a mindfulness app. In our case, we use Headspace. And so just an opportunity to sort of train yourself and do some proactive self-care related to mental health. But if you're injured or ill, you're needing the EAP, and you're perhaps needing sort of more significant opportunities to step away from work, like leave programs, et cetera. And so to help navigate all of that, we actually created a very low-tech solution to help address that by creating just a mental health navigation guide for our workforce. It is a simple ebook that articulates, helps you understand the services and offerings of the programs we have in our organization and where you might be on that spectrum to help get the support you need, and to just help address the topic overall. And again, like it's not that you are necessarily always injured and needing that support. To your point, it's not a big moment in time or a significant event. It's the accumulation of many things over time that might benefit from, you know, things like you know, a cognitive behavioral therapy program or things of that nature. So I think it's important to structure to help help articulate offerings in a way that's consumable, help people to kind of break down the barriers of entry into the supports that might exist in the organization. And that often is, honestly, or can be accomplished in pretty simplistic or low-tech ways. You know, let's call it low-tech innovation.
All right, thank you very much, Jeff. Jen, I want to move it a little off to a different topic, which is, in addition to helping your own employees, are the members of CAFII and industry more generally trying to help customers cope with mental health issues and challenges caused by workplace economic and societal pressures?
At Canada Life, we have a wonderful site that sits separate from the Canada Life banner called Workplace Strategies for Mental Health. And on that website, you'll find over, I think they said the other day, over 700 pieces of information, and it could be toolkits or it could be training, lots of simple downloads that are translated into French and English from all different topics. Of course, very heavy around psychological health and safety. Lots of people will know the work that they did around the standard in Canada and those pieces. But even things from how to give feedback, how to have difficult conversations, managing performance, also accommodations, how to have conversations about mental health, different ways to promote mental well-being in the workplace as well too, all for free. I know before I worked at Canada Life, I used to access it all the time, and I still do. Sometimes I borrow it to get inspiration, or I will give it some material to a leader to launch and use with their own team too. So lots of great material on there, and it's available to anyone.
Excellent. Paula, Jeff, similar situations with your organizations, I presume?
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in. So we know about the website and the resources that Jennifer mentioned, and excellent resources. We're focused a lot on making sure that we're equipping managers. So the leader training, you know, what does a mentally healthy workplace look like? How do you deal with and build trust in the workplace that helps give that people that sense of belonging? And how do you do it in whatever situation you have? You cannot assume that if you're back into the office, that'll happen automatically. You have to be intentional about it. If you're remote, you have to be intentional as well. So it's a standard skill. And we have seen declining trust in workplaces. So it's something that we need to bolster up. That ability to step in, and what really resonated when you were talking, Jennifer, about that, I forget the words you used, but it was that kind of kind stigma. We've seen that as well. You know, it's not just nice people who are immune to causing damage, right? Like you know, we really want to make sure that you're respectful, that you are not protecting somebody in a way that actually makes them feel more anxious because it makes them feel that they're being viewed as incompetent. When we do sort of help managers understand not only how to support an ongoing mentally healthy workplace and team, but also how to intervene. And it's not hard. It's just that we've taught ourselves a whole bunch of things that are not right because, you know, society is messed up in the way they deal with mental health. We kind of go back to, you know, basic human principles around making sure that people know that they are valued, that they know that you are there for them to help support them, that you can be very specific in terms of what might be available, but, you know, you're not getting into a counseling relationship. So a lot of support needs to be, I think, more embedded in the workplace as opposed to mental health week or mental health month, because it is so critical.
Thank you for that. I want to follow up on a separate issue with you, Paula. All three of you on the panel today are with, you know, large, well-established institutions, but there's an increasing number of Canadians, especially young Canadians, who are now in the so-called gig economy. And how do they get support for mental health issues? And will this become a societal problem? So I'll start with you, Paula, then I'll ask Jen and Jeff to jump in on this topic.
Yeah, I think it's a really important thing to look at because a lot of these workers have no safety net in any respect. And it shows. We did a study not long ago and we looked at gig workers, and without question, their mental health and resilience scores were much less, quite significantly less than those who were employed in whatever situation that they were employed in, small, medium, large employers. So the typical gig worker is not necessarily your independent entrepreneur. That's a different category. It's somebody who's really in very precarious situations. We also found, interestingly enough, a lot of workers also have side gigs, and that group, their mental health was more compromised for a number of reasons as well, financial as well as the strain on them. But just getting back to the full-time gig workers, I do think that this is going to be an issue that gets a lot more attention. We have some entities like, your ride sharing apps and stuff having pressure to offer benefits because it is important. It impacts our society. It impacts our public health costs. Likely, I would like to see more opportunities for gig workers to be part of consortiums where they could get a full range of benefits and support. Because it will increase, and that's not to anybody's benefit, at least in terms of a health and mental health point of view.
Thank you, Paula. Jen, you want to jump in on this?
I think some of the things that happened during COVID could be helpful to gig workers. So, for example, CMHA released Bounced Back, and so people can enroll in that for some support. I come from working in community mental health. So, for example, I come from the Waterloo Wellington region, and there's some drop-in support and that sort of thing too. But I totally agree with Paula. Those area folks really they do not have a real traditional safety net as if they were with a larger employer. And hopefully that there'll be continue to things that move forward, because sometimes just going to a doctor is not enough, and we need some more ongoing support compared to maybe even what they would get in a community mental health setting.
Thank you, Jennifer. Jeff, you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's almost well covered as far as sort of societal, and is it a societal thing? Like it is. I think for me, maybe the other thing to comment on it almost connects to Jen, the previous question, right? And then what's our role and how can we? So I do think it is things like participating and continuing the dialogue and participating in forums like this. I mean, the word gets out when you continue to sort of keep the conversation going. What are you doing inside your large organizations like ours to affect those outside of your four walls? We're at BMO, we're hosting events with customers and trying to connect them to some of our knowledgeable partners on the topic, like TELUS Health and Cleveland Clinic. Like we're trying to make that connection. And so obviously, using this example, a gig worker could certainly be a BMO customer, and we hope they are. And so how are we trying to just think creatively about the reach? Because this topic of mental health, it goes well beyond the walls of our organizations.
All right. Well, thank you all three of you for that. It is going to be an issue I think that we're going to see a lot more discussion of, and so I have no doubt that we'll have many more conversations about this. I want to talk about something that you've each mentioned, and Paula in particular. You spoke about how many employees don't know about their programs that are available to them or don't use them, and that is obviously a very major concern. I'd like to start with you, Jeff, and then I'll turn to Jen and Paula on what can organizations do to try to drive more use of these excellent and important services?
Yeah, I mean, so I think honestly, it's about being incredibly intentional about your post-launch strategy to anything and everything you are bringing to bear to support your organization. So that seems like such a simplistic statement, yet it's, I would argue, regularly the thing that gets less attention, right? So you have a lot of fanfare and intention in bringing a program to life and sharing its new existence. And are you thinking about that ongoing conversation, dialogue, and push over a protracted period of time beyond that, right? You don't want to have a launch it and leave it mentality in your organization. So we're I think honestly, like what I would say, just to kind of speak about what's going on at BMO, we're pretty intentional that we have a lot right now. We need to use it more, and so most of our effort is about this amplification strategy, this communication strategy, this ongoing dialogue, and figuring out ways that you're talking about it and highlighting it in creative, in creative forums to drive usage, understanding, destigmatization, like all these things we've talked about. It's critical. It's just, it is an ongoing effort. We said it at the beginning. We are not where we want to be on the topic of destigmatization and concerns about, the impact it might have on your career and all these other things we've talked about. They are still there. And so the likelihood that that's impacting the utilization, very high, right? So you need to think about just kind of this always on intentional communication strategy. And what, I think, don't be afraid about sharing the stats, right? Like we have this great thing, we talk about it all the time, but only 17% of you are using it. Like use the stats to drive the action, right? I think it's there's not a lot super technically advanced in what I just shared, yet it's probably under executed. I think we would all agree.
Thank you. Jen?
I totally agree with what Jeff is saying. One thing that we're going to work on this year is really working on promoting our manager consults. And I think when leaders call our EAP and get support, they can say, hey, what I called EAP, this is what it was kind of like. And so really normalizing it, they don't need to say why they've called it, but really just normalize that conversation and reaching out for help. Or I found it really supportive. They were able to connect me for some services for my child, or lots of people call EAP for different reasons, right? For all those support pieces, financial, marital, parenting, like so many different reasons to call. It's a wealth of information that's not utilized as much as it should be. One thing that our benefit team did, which I thought was great, it was there when I first joined, is they created personas. So these little scripts around people and what different parts of our benefits they accessed. And I thought, wow, that's really great because I can see myself in that. And so when people can see themselves in those personas, they're more up to use them because we've created them for a reason. And I think just keeping it fresh. We really work with our ERGs to promote our benefits, to have boilerplate messages after events, to make sure people can get support if they need it. Lots of things like that too. But it has to go beyond onboarding, because I don't know about you, but I work in benefits and I had to go checking what I have sometimes too.
Thank you. Paula?
Yes, so I couldn't agree more with what both Jeff and Jennifer have said. I'm just going to pick up a little bit on the personas and the personalization, because that's super important. Like what we're talking about is we're talking about marketing. We're talking about, helping people understand the value to them and see themselves getting that value. Like that is, marketing 101. So the range of personas, the examples of different types of services, because again, what we found is, some people believe it's just for alcohol, it's just for crisis response, it's just one session, it's just like there's all sorts of erroneous information that is out there because it hasn't been replaced with the right information. And also think about, just generally speaking, embedding, like not thinking about your EAP and manager training and all the rest of that as programs, but embedding it into your workplace and embedding it into your culture. So it's natural. You have a manager, as we said, who has as part of their toolkit the consults. We have a training that's brought out on a kind of a regular basis. You promote when there's critical times in your organization. So when somebody first starts, when they get a promotion, when there is an org change, when there is a very heavy sort of a project that's done, those sort of teachable moments. And again, just borrow really from marketing, because marketing is really well developed. You even see things like breakfast cereals in the morning and hamburgers at night. Why? Because you're going to resonate with breakfast cereals in the morning and hamburgers at night. So it is more it needs to be more strategic than I think we're assuming in many cases now.
Thank you, Paula. I'd like to just, with all three of you, just to build on this a little bit in terms of leadership. So I'm just thinking back to a Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, James Bartleman, who made it one of his 3 priorities to destigmatize mental health issues. And as part of that, he spoke about his own mental health issues. Leaders in your organizations in senior positions who would be willing to speak about their own mental health issues and explain how, despite those, they have been able to succeed in their careers and move forward, and so therefore sort of inspiring people not to hide those things and to seek whatever support they need. I'm just wondering if you would agree that that is also a strategy for making people more comfortable with accessing some of these services. Who would like to start?
I'll jump in. I think yes, without question, and it kind of addresses not only for the general population but other leaders as well. We did a fairly significant study on the health and well-being of C-suite leaders, and what we heard over and over again is that the rules were different for them. So there wasn't a lot of stigma in their organization, but they really felt that their careers would be compromised. So it's important to show that that's not necessarily in any way, shape, or form the case. But I'd also think that it's important to show good stories, positive stories at every level, because sometimes what you intend is not the way it's received. So leaders coming out, absolutely. But I also want my entry-level call center person to know that they won't be in a bad situation, that they will be supported, that they can move to the next level. It's not just about people who have built up a fair bit of credibility and support. So I really just think we need to make sure that we have that range of examples, but leaders definitely do have an impact when they come forward.
Thank you. Jeff?
I mean, that is so powerful, and couldn't agree more around the idea of all levels. I think we tend to focus on leaders because of traditional hierarchies, and perhaps arguably sometimes they may end up being the most difficult to convince to share openly, right? There's this weird dynamic around their brand and other things that might be in the way. Although I would argue I am seeing sort of positive trends in the opposite to the opposite of that, right? I think they're starting to realize that is actually a powerful contributor to a positive brand, the willingness and openness to share. But it is key, of course, to Paula's point, you have to see yourself in the person. And so if it is your most senior leaders speaking about the topic all the time and only them, it may be hard for your call center person to see themselves in the CEO seat and the trials and tribulations that individual might go through on any given day, and sort of resonate with how that might be impacting their mental health. They're probably going to, you would have to assume they might kind of default to if you only knew type of a on the things that they're dealing with. So I love that. I actually love that when I go to things like this, I take little nuggets away. I think there's an opportunity for me to even think about how we can put some of that in action ourselves, because we have been pretty focused on our leaders to try to get them to tell stories, but all levels is great. And I agree completely.
Thank you. Jen?
I think anytime we can talk about recovery and stories of recovery, it builds hope, it builds openness for people to talk about it. Anytime we can talk about our own lived experience, it just normalizes and demystifies mental health. We never are surprised when somebody recovers from something that's physical. And I think that, when I've done mental health training for organizations in the past, people have said to me, "You mean people really can recover from this?" I'm like, yes, definitely they can. So talking even about when people tell their stories, talking about what was helpful for them. And it's not always going and seeing a psychiatrist. It can be doing so many other things that build positive mental well-being too. So really highlighting those other things in a real holistic way can be helpful.
All right, thank you very much. Jen, Jeff, Paula, the hour has flown by. We're just in the final few minutes. It's flown by because all three of you are so insightful. I really think I can say on behalf of all of the participants who've attended today, how much we appreciate your wisdom. I want to end the webinar by asking each of you, if you were Prime Minister or Premier, what changes would you institute to better support Canadians facing mental health issues? Jen, you want to start us off?
I think because I started my career off in children's mental health, I would say that we've got to start young with prevention, teaching young people how to regulate emotions, giving a lot of those pro mental health skills at a very early age so they have them to serve them through life. Run into lots of people that don't have those even in adulthood. And so it'd be really great if you'd start a little bit earlier.
Excellent. Jeff?
Going right after that, I have to pick up again and just sort of say, I agree. I mean, probably something in the, like a little bit more of an intentional intervention into the education system to kind of ingrain this in the early stages and throughout the journey of growing into adulthood. I think these are life skills that we're talking about. And so, yeah, I think that I would have to agree wholeheartedly.
Paula?
Yeah. So if I was Prime Minister, so right after I increased this Prime Minister's salary and changed the decorator for the Prime Minister's home, I would also support starting very fundamentally having a standard, a minimum standard in terms of how we support youth and in schools and in every respect. But I'd also extend that minimum standard to public health as well as employer. I think we have a lot of fragmentation. If you go to one province or even one part of Ontario and go to another part of Ontario, you might have different access to support, which is in my mind unacceptable. So I'd really look at least the base of what is necessary for the health of Canadians and the mental health of Canadians, and make sure that that's federal and a federal standard, employers as well as workplaces, and then build from there.
Okay, excellent. Just before we sign off, Paula, I'll start with you, then Jeff and Jen. One last word of wisdom for the people that are sitting in on this today. Paula?
I think we have a lot of opportunity, but I think we have to sort of move on it. We know that there are different challenges. Even in this conversation, we came up with a few. If each of us can take away at committing ourselves in our workplaces to go full force into addressing even one thing, then we'll move forward, whether it's knowledge of EAP or whether it's, including the pharmacogenomics or training managers. Just start, don't worry about making it too big. Just do one thing and you'll have an impact. Then you can figure out your next thing after that.
Excellent. Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, and do your part in continuing the conversation, right? If this is an opportunity for a viral moment where the participants go and they tell 2 other people or 3 other people, then we're continuing the movement, right? So I think, ask yourself where you can affect the conversation, whether that's professionally or personally, on more than one additional person, and do that, because the more we talk about it, the more we're going to make progress.
Excellent. And final word to you, Jen.
I think as you're driving change, don't forget about yourself. So walk the walk too. Make sure you're doing a well-being investment and keeping that top of mind, because the more we can model it, the more we can demonstrate it for others, they'll be inspired to do it too.
Excellent. Well, again, you've been a fantastic panel. All 3 of you have provided us with great wisdom and insights. On behalf of all the attendees, thank you so much. And I'd like to wish you and all the people that were in attendance a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.